Hi there, and welcome to the show. You're listening to another Effisode. Every other Tuesday, I release a short bit about whatever's going on in the Parks household or whatever's in my head at the time. It's a way for you to get to know me a little better in between my rare disease interviews. Choo-choo! All aboard! Our local playground is complete. Let me tell you a little bit about it. It's always lovingly been called the train park because there was a big old train that kids could climb on. And man, there are always barriers, roadblocks, and unforeseen circumstances, aren't there? Especially in rare disease land, but also in the land of inclusion and accessibility. And I'm not only talking about the financial aspect or freak accidents, but the human one. If you haven't figured it out yet, I seem really sweet, and I am, but I do have a lot of my dad in me. I used to think that it was a curse and thought of it more as stubborn and hard-headed. But as I've grown older, but especially after becoming a rare disease mom, I realized that it was integrity, and it has become one of my superpowers. I really just don't like injustice and exclusion. And the fact that in 2022, disabled people are at best an afterthought in most places. Sometimes I imagine I'm like Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music, but I'm not frolicking around those hills singing Do-Re-Mi. Well, kind of. That song has literally been stuck in my head since childhood. No, I am up on those sweeping hills, metaphorically, as in, these are the hills I will die on. Lots of those hills since bringing a little disabled dude into the world. Inclusion and accessibility is one of them. Last spring, around March 2021, I believe, we were on a walk and there was a sign up at our local playground, the train park, that said the equipment was old and it's not safe anymore and the park's going to be closing and they're going to order new equipment and it'll be replaced. See my Instagram or TikTok for what that park used to look like and what was going to simply just be replicated. So myself, my in-laws, John and Mariana, thank goodness for them. They're so good at their jobs. Technically, they're retired, but their skills they have as former journalists and policy workers, they have definitely come in handy, especially in this instance. They jumped on board right away, as did so many of our friends in this town. We began advocating for the plans to halt and for the city to listen about making this park inclusive and accessible. Their response? We never even considered that. Thank you for your input. Honestly, I loved that answer. There were hundreds of emails, lots of Zoom meetings with the city, public opinion forums. Yikes, that was the worst part. That's the stuff that reminded me of all the hills to keep climbing. The new park was a result of extensive planning by such amazing human beings from the city and the Parks Department. Jesse Bond, Paul West, local citizens, Ashley Hay from our preschool association, the Rotary, again, my in-laws. And it was glorious. Hearts and minds were changed, and it was so evident in the cutting of the ribbon a few days ago. The park was actually completed 10 months late because so many things just kept getting on the tracks. At one point, the facility that makes the playground equipment actually caught on fire. Yes. And the rubber surface for the playground itself, it couldn't be poured for over 6 months. That's all we needed in the end because they needed 3 full days without rain. And that just doesn't happen in Seattle, especially on our wettest year. But it was the little engine that could, that's for sure. There's a newer, bigger train now in that playground, and all the kids are climbing on it, and it even has an underpass, so kids in wheelchairs can enjoy it too. The city approved an increased budget and pledged to make future renovations to our local parks inclusive and accessible. And several citizens expressed hope that all of our local playgrounds can be lifted up to these standards. And guess what? A new parks levy will be on the November 2022 ballot. You should have felt the joy at the playground the other day. People were glowing, people were crying. I saw not only Ford on the playground, he wasn't the only disabled kid. There were lots of them, and it was beautiful. All aboard the inclusion train.